Hello, everyone. This is Valentina Rada, and we continue talking about applied ethnography. This time is a second chapter in Palto's book and talks about the steps of ethnographic field research. But before I go deeper in the three concepts I chose for this week from this chapter, I would like to outline the roadmap Palto is bringing to us of the ethnographic field research. I think it's important to understand that ethnography goes to very similar roadmap of the research design, but there are a couple of areas that are different than some other research types. So he talks about, obviously, first thing, he talks about literature review. When getting familiar with existing research on the phenomena or the topic we want to research. But then he talks about making initial contacts, and we will talk about that. Training the research team is another area on the roadmap. Just keep in mind that ethnography is pretty complex and it does entail to a research team, and you want every person in the team to be trained and understand ethnographic concepts. Then talks about social mapping of the key participants in the research. It talks about defining a conceptual framework to kind of outline the emergent concepts of the first phase of the research. Developing sampling strategies for data gathering. He talks about actually protocols and approaches for data collection. Pilot testing being one of the key areas that he highlights, especially in ethnography. Writing the report in the paper for publication, obviously, and then at the end, he has very insightful guidelines about ethical considerations in research, but especially in ethnographic field research. So I want you to kind of bring that up front. Before I go into the concepts I found insightful from this chapter. So, three elements that we will discuss this week are social mapping of the research participants, sampling and data collection, and ethical considerations. Okay, so let's go to the first topic, which is social mapping of the participants. A couple of areas here that I think are helpful in an ethnographic type of research would be to identify the leaders of the program. It's not only the people that we are going to interview, but it's about the people that are decision makers in the program. You want to have those kind of relationships with them. Maybe they will be part of your research, maybe they will not, but they will be people that will be introducing you to the site and the culture you are going to observe. Connect with the program people. And here I found helpful page 46 in the book. If you look, Paltos does a really nice job with some ladies drawing out this kind of social mapping. And I think it's helpful. I'm a believer in social mapping, especially working in project management. But what I wanted to bring up here, that mapping, yes, can be done on paper, but there are also tools out there such as Mind Manager that could help you do this mapping on a computer. Then obviously build the relationships with the informants in the program. Another area that I think Palto brought up, and it relates a lot to ethnography, is not only connecting with the people, but observing the location area too. I don't know, it's an education, it's a classroom, it's hospital, it's wherever the culture you're going to observe. It's important to see the location where the participants are interacting with each other. What is that environment? Because that impacts the way they connect with each other. The second topic is the sampling. It's about sampling strategies. And also, Palto is outlining here that we should be choosing different sampling strategies for each of the group of the participants. Okay, we are not going to talk with all the participants in the site. We are not going to talk with all the leaders, but who are the key people or the key player we are going to engage with? Sampling strategies in general, not only for ethnography, depends on the research instruments we are going to choose. So remember, we have an entire population which we cannot interview, which we cannot make observations for. So that's why we decide to do a sample. Sample can be big, sufficiently big, if we choose to do experiments or surveys. But when we talk about interviews or focus groups, be mindful that sample is pretty small. And there are different kind of sampling strategies for quantitative versus qualitative research methodology. I'm not going to go deep into those, but just be mindful that the sampling strategies are different. Another concept that I thought Paul did a great job was about pilot testing. He says, start with a small number of cases to verify if open-ended questions are clear and aligned to the local cultural vocabulary. So, you don't want to start a discussion with vocabulary that you are accustomed, you as a researcher. You have to understand the jargon, how people talk to each other. And it's not about the language per se, it's about the vocabulary they use. I don't know, in education, they talk in a different way, in how they talk in a different way. So do this pilot testing to capture what are the key elements that are using that particular culture in their vocabulary and incorporate those in your open-ended questions for the research. I found this very insightful. Next, data collection. We talk about case interviews, we talk about structured qualitative observation. And then at page 49, Palto talks about combining quantitative results with qualitative information. It's what's called in mixed methods triangulation. You have different sources of information in different format, and you have to be able to merge the meaning that comes from each of them. The beauty of ethnography is that it allows you to collect additional qualitative data if needed. So let's say after you merge your quantitative results with the qualitative information, you still are not to the meaningful findings you are trying to accomplish, you still have this opportunity to collect additional qualitative data. Either you do interviews or you go observe certain behaviors of the research participants. Next, and most of you might be familiar and heard this many, many times about the ethical considerations. However, Palto does a great job in summarizing them and kind of outlining why it's important to follow this guidelines. So first of all, he talks about protecting the privacy, anonymity, confidentiality, and safety of the participants. As the researchers, we do have this responsibility to be mindful of the privacy and confidentiality of the respondents. And some of you already have been through the city training, which will cover the protection of the human aspects in our research. Then Palto talks about field data sharing rights, that field data belongs to the sponsoring organization. So regardless of what your research is going to be about, the culture you're going to study belongs to a certain nature. Don't think of an organization per se, but there are some foundations there. There are some key players. There are key decision makers. These people are and can ask for the field data, for the results, for your findings at any point in time. So be mindful of that. Research should produce valuable information for the community. We don't do research for the sake of doing research. We do research to help others in the community, not only the participants, but those that are impacted by the phenomenon we are trying to research. Participants should receive an explanation of the nature and the purpose of the research, and that's why we do the informed consent. When they engage or when we ask them to engage in our research, we want to be as transparent as possible, explaining what is the purpose of our research and why we do it and what is the nature of it. Show respect and egalitarian attitudes for people's culture, practices, and beliefs. So again, we come in a culture, we as researchers, we come in a culture with our values and beliefs. However, throughout the research process, we should align to the culture, to the people in the culture, to their values. Okay, we may not believe in them, and that's okay, but we have to be respectful of their values and beliefs. Protect anonymity of certain types of participants, especially children. You will see that that's just a big deal, children's protection. But also there are cases like studying women in violent relationships or those kind of sort of bad relationships. You want to protect their anonymity. So just be mindful where your participants are coming from, how vulnerable they are, and you don't expose them and you don't put them in situations where, their privacy is not protected. So this is about ethical considerations. So really quick, let's just recap what we covered this week. And we talked about social mapping of the participants, engage not only with the participants, but with the leadership or the decision makers in the organization or culture you're trying to study. Also being mindful of observing area and the environment of the culture. Number 2, we talk about sampling and data collection. There are different sampling strategies, and we are using pilot testing. When we do data collection, be mindful of this pilot testing because we want to align to the participants' vocabulary and a language in the culture that we are trying to observe them. And then obviously the ethical considerations, protecting human aspects of the research, privacy, confidentiality, anonymity of certain types of participants. And then also be mindful that the study should be producing valuable information for the community. So these were the 3 concepts we covered. Now, really quick, the questions for this week are these 2 questions. In terms of sampling strategies for ethnographic research, would the pilot testing sample differ from the main research sample? Why or why not? So here, this is not a right or wrong answer. Just think about it. So we understand from what Palto is presenting to us that pilot testing is important. Now, how different, if or not, would it be sampling for the pilot versus sampling for the main research? Just think about it. And the second question is, why do you think the contribution of ethnographic research to the community is considered in Palto's ethical guideline? And it's not only in Palto's, it's a general standard. Just go a little bit deeper on why do you think our contribution is an ethical consideration? Okay, so this was the question for this week. And one more area that I wanted to cover with you, and I meant to do it last week too. These were the references I used for this week video as well as for the last week video. There are a couple of good references, good books that you can use for research design, especially if you are approaching a qualitative exam. It's Barkler, it's Craswell, and it's Levy. Don't stress out, but I think they're a great source of information to better understand research design and methods. I think that's what I have for this week. I look forward to your discussions, and enjoy your weekend. Thank you.